of the great things about Azure is the fact that we have the ability to add all these different resources, but we also have the ability to control restrictions on these resources, as well as control restrictions on what fellow admins can do as well. And this isn't anything necessarily new in terms of administration. We've had things called policies for decades, really, in the IT world. But in fact, in the on-premise Active Directory world, we always had these things called group policies, right? Or GPOs, group policy objects, that we could apply at different places, and these group policies would allow us to control and put restrictions in our environment. Well, in Azure, we actually have these things called Azure Policies. Azure Policies will allow us to control certain things, restrict certain things, and then we can also verify the compliance of things as well. So this is an interesting thing to check out and play around with. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of policies that you can look into, and the great thing about Azure Policies also is that not only is Microsoft creating policies, but you can actually go to the community. There's a community of policies out there. In other words, developers are creating policies using what's called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, and if Microsoft hasn't included a policy that you're wanting, you can actually import that policy in through what's called JSON, and you can actually have that policy do what you need it to do. And there's also a community moderation, so a lot of the stuff is being moderated. You don't have to stress over somebody creating some custom policy and it like breaking your whole environment, although it is important that you verify what exactly a policy is going to do before you apply it. But at least there is some moderation that's out there that's checking into all this. So I want to take a look at working with some Azure policies now. So here we are on portal.azure.com. We're going to click the little menu button here, and we're going to go to Resource Groups. And I'm just going to create a resource group. In my case, I'm going to call this resource group the East US Only RG, which is East US Only Resource Group. You can probably see where I'm going with that. Maybe I only want resources added to Azure if they are in East US, okay? Maybe that's the region of the world my business is in, or my users are in, and I want to require everything stay there. So I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to click to review and create. We're going to click create. We're going to create this resource group. Now we're going to go into the East US Only resource group, and I am going to create a storage account. Now, I'm not really explaining storage accounts to you here in this video. I will say that storage accounts are used for storing data in Azure, so storing files and things like that, but not getting into the details. I just want to add a resource, and I know that I can add a storage account resource very quickly. You can either add it through here, or if you go to the menu button, you can go to All Services, and you can search for storage accounts through here. Just search word storage, or you can click storage accounts. And so there's a couple of different ways you could do it. So I'm going to say create a storage account, and then from there, we're going to store it in the East US Only. Okay, I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this West US. I want to show you some problems with storage accounts. Again, not going over storage accounts fully in this video, but I will say that storage accounts have to have a web-based name, and you have to abide by these web-based standards that they require. And you can't have any capitalization, you can't have any spaces. And the other thing about storage accounts is the name must be unique across the world, meaning you can't, somebody else, if they've already named a storage account in their own tenant, in their own Azure environment, then you can't name it that as well. And that's not usually the case in most things in Azure. In most things in Azure, the name is only important for your internal use. It's not necessarily internet-based, but storage accounts can be internet-based, so they require you to have a unique name. So I'm just going to call this West US Only Storage JC for John Christopher, okay? And then from there, but West US Only storage account, all right? And then from there, I am going to go right here, and I have standard and premium. Not going to really get into that a whole lot right now, but that gets into like what kind of hard disk drives, if it's using a hard disk drive platter based or if it's using solid state, all that. Not going to really get into. This is redundancy, not going to get into that right now either. I'm not really explaining storage accounts, as I've already mentioned. I just want to add a storage account. So I'm going to click, now I want to show you something. I am going to choose West US, okay? So you'll notice that I can choose West US, even though I have created my resource group in East US and I've called it East US only. I'm going to choose West US. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It's going to validate. Everything's good. I'm going to click create. And it is now going to create me a storage account. Now, the weird thing about it is that my resource group is in East US. My storage account resource is stored in a different region. And I don't want that. I called this the East US only storage account for a reason. So if you had fellow admins or something that were adding resources that you didn't want them to be able to add, then of course that could be a problem for you, right? As you can see, it was created. All right. I should be able to go to the menu button, click resource groups. Now, I'll also warn you that sometimes it takes a little while to show up. So sometimes it's quicker than others. But let's go into East US only. And as you can see, it hasn't shown up yet. So I can keep, there it goes. So West US only, there's my storage account. As you can see, it's located in the West US, even though the East US only resource group is located in East US. So obviously that is a problem, right? I don't want that. I don't want that to be the case. So I want to set a policy on this resource group that will let me control that. Okay, so I can do that. I can create policies on resource groups, all right, that will let me do that. So let's go into the East US, and I can go to policies, and then from there, I want you to notice there's a couple things here. You have assign a policy or assign an initiative, okay? So a policy is just a single thing you want to put in place, like a single policy you want to put in place. An initiative is just a group of policies you want to put in place. So instead of applying a single policy, you're applying a group of them. It's kind of like in on-premise Active Directory, we had a GPO. A GPO is a group policy object. Basically, it's an object that can contain a group of policies if you want. So if you wanted to do a bunch of policies, you can do assign an initiative. You can specify which policies you want to apply. If you're only going to apply a single policy, you just want to apply one policy, then you can go and just say assign a policy. All right, and you can specify what policy that you want to actually assign. Okay. Now the other thing is, let me go back here to policies. Okay. I can look before I start assigning things. I can look at what are called the policy definitions. A policy definition is the code for that policy. Now, the majority of everything that you do in Azure is made up of what's called JSON. JSON is JavaScript object notation, and so you can actually develop policies using JSON. I'm not really digging in. This is not a developer course, so I'm not digging into the programming behind that, but you can see these different policies, and you can actually look at the JSON code, and by looking at the JSON code, you can actually learn how to build policies yourself. There's actually lots of content out there, available information, available documentation on building these policies yourself if you want, authoring these. Okay, but anyway, I can look through all these. I can also search based on a certain criteria if I want. But as you can see, there's just lots and lots and lots. There's hundreds and hundreds of these things. But if I want to search by name, maybe I want to search for the word location. Okay, there is a policy called allowed locations. So if I click on that, here is the actual JSON code for it. So you can kind of read through it. The great thing about it is it's not really that complicated. Even if you're not like a programmer or something, you can kind of dig in and look at the pattern that's being used here and sort of figure out what's going on, right? But I can see that it says this policy enables you to restrict the locations your organization can specify when deploying resources. All right, so it's basically going to let me enforce geo-compliance, storing resources in a certain area, right? So I can totally do that if I want. All right, you can actually, the other thing you can do if you wanted to add to this, you could duplicate this definition in your environment, and you could create your own custom version of this if you want. So that's really cool. You can export this. That's helpful too if you have created some custom code or something, you want to export this out of your Azure environment and then import it into maybe a different Azure environment, you can. And then of course if you want to assign this policy, that's a quick way to assign it. Assign this policy directly to a resource group. But let's go back, all right? Let's go back to our East US resource group. Let's go to policies, and then let's click on, we're going to go assign this policy, all right? So right here it says, okay, the scope you're doing this to is a subscription, and then the East US RG. Do you have any exclusions? I'm not excluding anything here, all right, but it will allow you to exclude certain resources if you want. And then here's where you would put your definition. So let's find that definition. Okay. You'll notice that Microsoft has 1,623 definitions at the creation of this video. Of course, over time that's going to go up. But let's do a search for the word location. All right. And scroll down, and there it is, allowed locations. All right. So this policy enables you to restrict the locations your organization can specify when deploying scenarios used to enforce geo-compliance requirements, exclude resource groups. It says excludes resource groups, Microsoft Azure resource groups, and then you have allowed location for resource groups. This policy enables you to restrict the locations for your organization can create resource groups in. Okay, so this is for creating a resource group. All right. Used to enforce geo-compliance. This is for creating resources inside of a resource group. So I'm actually going to go with this one. This would be if I was creating resource groups. This one is if I'm creating resources in a resource group. So I'm going to select this one, and then I'm going to hit select. All right. And then from there, do I want to go ahead and turn this on? I can, or if I wanted to disable it and turn it on later, I could do that. So I'm going to say enabled. All right. We're going to click next. We have to specify parameters. A parameter is some type of setting that is required in order for this policy to be processed. Okay, so I do have, if I tried to create this right now, if I said create, I'm going to get an error, and the error is telling me you got to specify the parameters. So we'll go here, and we're going to basically say East US. All right, we're just going to allow East US. And yes, I do realize there's an East US 2 and all that stuff, but we're not gonna do all that right now. Now, the other thing is you have what's called remediation. It says by default, this assignment will only take effect on newly created resources. Existing resources can be updated via a remediation task. So what they're saying here is that you have this thing called compliance with policies, and what happens is that once you apply this policy, it's going to look at the resource group, and it's going to look to see if there are any resources that are not compliant. And some policies will do automated remediation, meaning they can automatically remediate something. They can change something so that it adheres to certain standards, okay? And then some policies cannot. This particular policy cannot auto-remediate because it doesn't know, for example, if your resource is not in East US, it doesn't know where to move it to. It's not going to move it automatically because it doesn't know where to move it to. Now, it also tells you that you can move it, though. You can manually do it. It's just it can't auto-remediate. Some policies can auto-remediate something, and then some cannot. Okay? All right. Not getting into managed identities right now. I'm going to click next. It says, do you have a non-compliance message? So you want to specify a message. I can say just not compliant. Just like that. If this is not going to be compliant, which compliant. There we go. And so now we will click next, review and create. Let's go ahead and create this. All right, so right out of the gates, it's added this policy, and you'll notice that right now it says overall 100% compliant. Although you guys know I'm not 100% compliant because my East US resource group contains a storage account that's not in the East US. It's in West US, right? So that is a problem. And so eventually this number will get updated. It can take about an hour sometimes before compliance will get updated. I don't know why it takes so long. Maybe it has something to do with replication in this case, but it can take up to an hour before remediation compliance will start reflecting. I'm hoping they're going to fix that eventually, but that's been the case for a very long time in Azure. Compliance does not always take effect very quickly. All right, now though, what I want to show you is there's my storage account. What I want to do now is I want to try to add another storage account in West US for this. So now that we've done this, we're going to go to all services here. Let's go to storage account. Let's click create. All right, and let's choose East US only, and I'm going to call this West US Storage JC2. Let's see. There we go. And I didn't put a 2. There we go. There's the 2. And so we're going to do West US. All right. And I'm just changing the redundancy to make it cheaper. I am going to remove this because I don't want it to really charge me, but I'm going to click review and create, and it's going to validate. Okay, we got a validation failure. Let's see what that validation failure is. It was disallowed by a policy. So our policy blocked it. Okay, let's go back over here and let's change this to East US. And that's the only thing I changed. So now let's see if it will validate. And it did. So I will be able, I can click create and submit it. And as you can see, it is in the process of deploying it. So I should not get an error. All right. Now the other thing to keep in mind that you can do, if you want everything to be compliant, right, I can go back over here to resource groups, go to East US, and if I want to move this West US resource group, I can click on it, or storage account. I can click on that storage account and I can click move and say move to another resource group. Notice you can also move to a different subscription if you want. But I'm going to say move to a different resource group. I'm going to move it over to the demo RG resource group. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll click next. It says, all right, you're going to, it says pending validation. So it's just validating that there's no problems. Like, for example, if there was a policy on that other one that would prevent it, then it's just pending validation because it's trying to verify there are no issues. All right. So once this gets officially done, I can go ahead and initiate the move and it'll go. But you notice it will take a few minutes, so I'll just pause the recording while this is going on. Okay, so it just took a couple minutes, and as you can see now, it will allow me to continue. So I'm going to click next, and it says I understand that tools and scripts associated with move resources will not work until I update them to use new resource IDs. That's fine. I'm going to click move, and I've triggered the move. Meanwhile, if I go back over to the East US resource group by clicking this little breadcrumb, I can see by refreshing my screen here that the other storage account that I created, which I forgot to rename it, but you guys will notice that it says West US Storage JC2, but it says East US. So I actually meant to rename it to East US when I was doing it, but I forgot to do that. That's okay. You did notice, though, that the resource group was created successfully. The policy did not stop it. This resource group right here will take a few minutes, but eventually it will get moved over to that other resource group. I just triggered that, right? So we just have to give it some time. Up here at the top of the screen, you can look at notifications, and you can see that it is still moving. So anytime you do stuff in Azure, you can click that little notification bell, and it will let you know that there is a task that's happening right now. And if there's any kind of an error or anything, it'll let you know that there's an error. Okay, so that is how you can work with Azure Policies. If you you can go out and you can check. There is lots of information on the internet about the communities of people that are creating Azure Policies. In fact, if I go right here and just go to google.com, I can say Azure Policy templates. All right, and there are some different places I can look at. So they have index of policy samples, but there's also GitHub. If you click on GitHub, Microsoft, of course, owns GitHub. You can see some different policy samples here. You can read about it. You can learn how to create your own policies and interact with this community of people that are creating policies. It's kind of outside the scope of what we're learning here, but it's definitely something, if you're interested in it, you can learn how to build policies yourself. Hey, this is John Christopher. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want you to know that I'm trying really hard to grow this channel, so I hope you'll give me a like and a subscribe. Also, if you'll check the description in this video, I've got a link for you that can show you how you can get access to all my different courses. I have lots of different Microsoft certification courses that'll help you pass your exam. All right, thanks a lot for watching the video, and I hope to see you again.